Hello and welcome along to a brand new episode of Writer's Routine. This week we're chatting to the award-winning author Antonia Hodgson. From making her name and winning awards with historical crime, she's started a new fantasy series. It's called The Raven Scholar. And you can hear how happy her publishers are with her switching genre. Also, why writing fantasy, it's all about asking questions.
How does this world work? Where's it come from? What's its history? Why are they? If you've got these eight animal guardians that people are drawn to, why? Is what happened to this society? Also with the map, what's its geography telling me? If an empire is vast and it's got, what's it like to live on one end of the empire from another?
And we talk about how she charts the day. She doesn't write a word count, so how does she know that she's done?
I'm very absorbed and, I'm just deep in the flow of it and I'm writing away. And when I lose that, I can still tinker and I can go back and edit, but I think I've just instinctively go, okay, that's it. I just think, I've drawn all that I can for the day.
It's all on the way with Antonia Hodgson in a brand new episode of Writer's Routine. Yes, welcome along to the show. My name is Dan Simpson. It's a podcast where we take a look inside an author's working day. If it sounds particularly echoey today, I'm talking to you from a room in the Crown Hotel in Harrogate, in the north of England. And Harrogate feels like one of the homes of books in the UK. So many writing festivals here. I have been up at the Harrogate Literature Festival. I spoke to Mark Watson last night about his brand new book, which is called 1 Minute Away, which is... It made me feel really uneasy, actually. If you know Mark's comedy, he's actually been on this show a few years ago. But if you know his comedy, high energy, fairly chaotic, a brilliant, almost rambling storyteller. And you wouldn't expect him to write the books that he does, I think. They're all about the human connection. And it's called 1 Minute Away. Yeah, it's a love story about the gig economy, about like a Deliveroo cyclist kind of thing. And it's very well written, and it does make you think about the invisible network of people all around us who maybe we don't appreciate as much as we should. Anyway, it's a very good book. I spoke to him last night. Also, yesterday was the Independent Podcast Awards. I didn't get to go because I was doing the interview, which is lucky because we were up for Best Book Podcast. We did not win. That went to the Failing Writers podcast, which is well worth it. So a full congratulations to them. Less of our universe. Let's get to our podcast this week with Antonia Hodgson. Novelist, screenwriter, former publisher, Antonia has written 4 acclaimed historical novels. Her first is The Devil in Marshalsea. It won the Crime Writers Association Historical Dagger Award back in 2014. It's a hugely commended prize. It was shortlisted for the Theakston's Crime Novel of the Year too. It was a Richard and Judy book club pick, a Waterstone's book club pick, a massive debut. And now she started a fantasy series, which has always been her first love, really. And The Raven Scholar is the first in this new trilogy. It's all about Bersun the Brusque, Emperor of Orrun, who is bringing his reign to an end after 24 years on the throne, and it looks at the 7 contenders to replace him. It's hard not to talk about fantasy with a voice that I hope was full of gravitas. We talk about the rules for fantasy with Antonia, how much she knows about the future of the series, and how thoroughly researched everything is. How do you research a world that you are creating? We'll find out. Also, you can hear about the new plan that she has, which means her start time has shifted. And this was recorded back in May, which is quite important for why her working day has shifted, which you'll hear all about, and loads more besides. So let's get into it with Antonia Hodgson, and we start, as we always do, with what she sees around her in the place where she sits down to write.
I move around my desk, but at the moment it's in my living room, and to my right I have a wall of books. And I also have lots of cards of animals that are related to the book that I've written. So there's a card with a raven on it, and there's a card with a fox in winter on it. There's even a raven feather, a real raven feather as well.
Why do you move around?
Well, partly I just like to shift perspectives. So I like working in the living room because I can look out my back window into my garden and see my bird feeder and watch all the birds. But that, again, is quite distracting. So sometimes I move to another room just for that reason alone. I like to sit in cafes sometimes as well, just to shake things up, because I work from home and I work on my own as well. So sometimes it's good to be surrounded by people.
Is it strict, kind of when and where you're working in these different places, or is it as the mood takes you?
It's pretty flexible. I do tend to stick in one of two rooms in the house. I don't work. For instance, I know some people can work on a sofa or in bed. I can't do that. I have to be at a desk. So that's pretty rigid for me. But other than that, I'm fairly movable. I'm a movable feast.
So where does the mood come from? Are you writing away in one room and you get itchy feet? Maybe there's a little bit of a block going on and it's just getting up and trying to wiggle it out?
I think there may be a bit of that. I think some of it is purely practical. I've got one room is warmer than the other, so it might be, these sorts of things we don't think about with writing, but they're just the practicalities of feeling comfortable. People often forget because you're sitting all day. So there's a bit of that. But sure, I think sometimes it's good to, if you're caught on something, on a scene, it's good to get a new perspective. That might be when I take myself out to a cafe, to be honest, because that is quite a big shift. So I would say the location can help. Changing location can help.
When an author has one space that they write, maybe an office, and that's just where they are for hours on end, they'll curate the space around them. So they might have Post-it notes or, a whiteboard. Whereas because you're peripatetic, I think is the word, up on the go, does that mean, your work is what you're working with is quite streamlined?
I don't. I do put up little pictures and things, but because I'm moving from room to room, I don't. I think they might be there in my subconscious, but I don't have that need to curate the way you describe it. As I said, I've got some greeting cards that make me think of the animals that I'm writing about, perhaps, but it's not. I don't feel rigid about it. Once I'm writing, I'm not really conscious of what's going on, other than in the world that I'm in. So, it all falls away, and I'm writing, and I'm in that world. So the stuff that's on the wall or that's not really. I'm not really aware of it. So it's when I stop, and as I said, I might stop, look out a window, notice the birds for a bit, get distracted. But when I'm actually writing, I could be anywhere really.
I know that the new novel, The Raven Scholar, is quite thoroughly researched. Where does that research live? Where is everything that you need in order to tell your story? Is it just on the laptop or whatever it is?
So I did a lot of research, although it's an epic fantasy, so a lot of it is invented. I did a lot of research on various animals that are important to the book. That I did. I went to the British Library and I called up tons of books on those subjects and on animal symbolism. And then I had various notebooks, and I had a different notebook for each animal that I scribbled all sorts of observations and quotes and things like that. And that helped me as I was in the planning stage. But then it tends to just absorb into my brain, and I don't then tend to go back and look at them while I'm writing. I usually put them away by that point. I might have them to hand if I really need to check a specific detail, but they're not right by my side as I'm writing.
And we get even more technical. We're interested in writing softwares and fonts. So just take me through that side of your setup.
With this with this series, I did change font. I think my previous books, which were historical, I think I wrote in Times Roman, just very standard. It felt they're set in sort of Georgian London. I don't know why that felt sort of semi-suitable. I doubt Times Roman had been invented in Georgian times. That's that being said. And people, your people will call me up on that. But that's what I wrote in. When I went to Epic Fantasy, because it was such a different book, I wanted a totally different font. So I went, sans serif and the much loathed Helvetica, I believe, is much loathed. Is that right? Or do some people love it?
I don't really know. I mean, I'm using it now but that's because it's I write a lot on Pages, which is the Apple software, and it's just the one that pops up.
Yes. Weirdly, with this book, because there's also some other voices within it, I would change font as well for certain. I think one of them, I might be misremembering. I think one of them might be something like Century Schoolbook or Century Gothic or something like that. But yeah, so I do play around with fonts when I'm, to get myself into that when I'm writing it, particularly if there's sort of a handwritten letter or things like that. It helps me for some reason.
How grand was that decision when you were moving to fantasy and you thought, well, it's such a radical departure, I'm going to mix up my font? Was there quite a long, lingering process of auditioning them all?
No, not massively. But I think I definitely thought it needed to be different, and it just seemed like the very different from Times Roman, but while still being pretty standard. Because I think once you get beyond the sort of fairly standard fonts, they're so particular that it's not that they're distracting, but it feels like you've made a really, really strong choice. And that might work I think that probably works for some people, and that might be why they do it. But for me, I think it would have been sort of weirdly distracting as I was writing, to have a font that I wasn't so familiar with. It would almost have felt like too strong, like almost competing with the voice. So it's like, this is very odd to be talking about fonts, but it's interesting to think about.
Oh, is it interesting? We're all over it. So, Antonia, the show is Writer's Routine. Take us through yours, if you don't mind. A day in the life of you writing a novel. The moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed, how does the whole thing look?
So it does shift. You're rather like, my location. I do work pretty much full time as a writer, although I also freelance edit as well. So on a day when I'm purely writing, I will usually be at my desk by the traditional 9 o'clock. But what I've been experimenting with recently, I've been waking up really early, I think because I'm very, very deep in the current book. I've been waking up really early and just trying out sitting at my desk straight away. And that would be like from 6 till 8 in the morning. So I think quite a few people do this. It's this funny time before everything is woken up, including myself. So I've been trying that, and I find it's really interesting and effective. So I will get a lot of work done, and it will be 9 o'clock, which is normally when I'm starting. But then I'll work pretty straight through. I'll just keep on working. Usually until at least 4 o'clock. Often later, but I don't work in the evenings. Is that enough? Is that information enough? Is that full enough? I've not told you my lunch, or
No, I'll pick through it. But if you're starting at 6 and you're writing till 4.
Well, that's a rare. As I said, that's a rare. My plan, because it's a new thing that I've just been waking up really early. So I think I'm still experimenting with it, and I think when I do the early starts, I'll finish earlier for sure, because you're not actually being effective. Well, I'm not anyway. Actually being effective by that point. If I've been working from 6 till 6. I don't think by the end of it, I'd be actually getting that much work done. I'd just be sitting at my desk pretending to work, really. So yeah, I think if that's what I've been experimenting with. It's essentially sort of shifting the day forward a couple of hours, and then having, especially now it's summer, having having a bit of an earlier finish means that I, there's still quite a lot of day left in the, living out here in the countryside.
Well, what necessitated what? I guess what came first? Did you find yourself waking up early because it's hot, it's boiling, you've got these ideas in your head that you're very excited to tell, so you just can't wait to jumpstart the day? Or have you kind of heard a lot about, well, starting early means that you've won the day before it's begun?
No, it's definitely the former. Definitely the former. I don't. I'm not suggestible in that way. It doesn't work. If someone tells me that I should do something, I probably just like subconsciously refuse to do it. So I think I just wake up. Have been waking up earlier. It's just the way it is. I do think it's probably because, as I said, I'm right in the middle of this, and I'm waking up thinking about it. So it's probably just on my mind, and I'm wanting to get into it.
Was there an intentional moment where perhaps you were waking up a little early and you were trying to delay until your traditional start time of 9, and you just thought, you know what, to hell with this, let's get cracking?
I think that I was just, it's unusual because I think it's not like waking up when you're kind of, I've woken up really early and I feel really tired. I was waking up incredibly alert. So it just felt like a natural thing to do, to get out of bed and sit at my desk. Because I was so alert, what else was I going to do, sort of thing, sort of like stare at the ceiling. So it just felt like my mind was telling me, come on, let's go, really.
And what have you noticed about what you're writing in those 2 early hours? If sometimes you said that sometimes you don't know what you're writing because it's so early. You're having a jump start on the day. Have you noticed it affect what it is you're writing at all?
It's still quite early. I would say, I've only been doing this for 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a month. So, but I think those first 2 hours do feel very concentrated. It's much less distracting. And whether that's purely just because I haven't got emails, and funny enough, another writer was saying something similar just the other day, that about certain times in the day when the rest of the world hasn't caught up with you. So I think it gives you it certainly gives me a clear, solid couple of hours of very, very concentrated work.
Does it have impacts later on in the day, or maybe later on in the week? Do you kind of feel the hit of the early starts?
Not really, no, which is curious. As I say, this is quite new. And I think before I would, as I said, I would do an almost traditional 9 till 5 sort of day. And I think that might be partly a throwback from years and years of working in an office, and that's just the mode I was in. So, I think it's quite an interesting early experiment. So I haven't got all the answers for you, which isn't great, is it, for this?
No, it's as all these things, it's about the journey, not the destination, isn't it? So we're exploring as we go. When you sit down at the start of your day, what's the aim? Is it a word count that you're working to? Is it a point that you're so excited to tell?
Yeah, I don't do word counts. I just have usually a scene or a place I want to get to within a chapter, or even within one character's specific development within that chapter. So that's as far as I go, and I don't kind of feel bad if I don't achieve that. I don't need a kind of goal I don't need to set a goal in order to feel that I've done a good day's work, if that makes sense. Because I find like if I said to myself I need to get to this point, or I need to have written these amount of words, I don't think that would actually spur me on, and I think it would only disappoint me, if I then didn't reach it. So I think I'm better at just going, okay, I'm in this chapter, and this is where we are, and set off from there. I have it all in my head. I know where I'm going. and it's somewhere in between the two. It's I will know sort of almost instinctively. Oh, look, you're spending a bit too much time on this, and you need to kind of press on. And at the same time, I don't like. I say it doesn't work for me anyway to say you have to have done this by the end of this week. It doesn't. It doesn't. It isn't conducive for me in terms of the writing process. It will actually stall me. I think that would paralyse me. Actually, I don't know if that answers your question, but in terms of like in a clock, I mean, I'm at my desk every day and it's moving along. It's not like I have long periods of time where things aren't moving. So yeah, it seems to work. It seems to work out. I just couldn't parcel it out because also certain chapters, which I think are going to take me ages, suddenly whiz by, and other chapters take longer, and sometimes I need to sit and think, or sometimes a chapter that I think is going to go one way goes another, or a character develops in a slightly different way. So even if I've done this in the past where I've tried to impose a sort of, this is what's specifically going to happen. And it just seems almost like a waste of time because then once I'm writing, it changes anyway.
And when it comes to the end of a day, because of the nature of trying to explore this or maybe getting this scene down, how do you know when you're done? Because you said that you're working more or less right the way through the day. How do you know when you're happy and it's time to finish up and forget about it for the evening?
I just stop being effective, and also I'm not sure I'm ever happy. Are authors ever happy? I'm happy. I'm happy. I'm absorbed, and I'm happy in that sense. But I'm always kind of thinking and working and pondering and thinking I need to go back and sort that out, etc. So I think it's more that I just lose that sense of flow, and at a certain point, and I go, okay, that's it then. There's no point. I guess I've learned over time. There's no point in just sitting there trying to force it.
When the words aren't coming out, where maybe it is a touch of a struggle. And I know you said that you're not that hard on yourself, right? Because you're not doing the word count thing. Is there anything that you've learned works for you to just tease a bit of words out when it looks tough?
I think I am hard. I think I am hard myself, just in different ways. But let me think about that question. I think really, as I said, to me, when when I'm working and it's the only way that I can think of is effective. When it's being effective, I'm very absorbed, and I'm just deep in the flow of it, and I'm writing away. And when I lose that, I can still tinker and I can go back and edit, but I don't. That I think I just instinctively go, okay, that's it, really. I just think I've drawn all that I can for the day, and I need to stop. So it's. I wouldn't call it instinctive exactly, but it's maybe a bit of a mixture of instinct and experience.
So, the new novel, we'll get to everything about the Raven Scholar in just a tick. But I guess the big news around it is that you are moving from historical crime to fantasy. Now, the little I've learned about the publishing industry is that publishers don't always like it when you do that. Like, when you have an audience who knows what we can expect from an Antonia Hodgson book, sometimes publishers might be quite loath to be like, no, just do the thing that we know that you are brilliant at. What has really made you want to change, and how keen were agents and publishers to let you do it?
Yes, I think I was lucky in that I'd written these 4 historical crime novels, and they'd come to a natural end. And I had a very understanding editor who was open and curious to what I wanted to do next. And the other thing is that before I was published, I did write a previous book that was a Gothic fantasy, and my editor knew that. He hadn't read it, funnily enough, because it was never published, and I put it away. But he was at least aware that that was a genre I really loved, and he knew just from my own reading taste as well. So I don't think it was it wasn't completely out of the blue, like I'd suddenly said, this thing, and it doesn't sound like me. So, and I think there are enough qualities that are similar that it didn't feel completely crazy, because obviously with a historical novel, you're you're creating a world, and you're trying to introduce people to a world they might not be aware of. So it has these similarities. But my editor wasn't a SFF editor himself, so he did then go away and talk to other people who were more specialised in the area, just so to show them the material that I sent, which was an outline. So if anything, that was more the discussion, was that he felt, this isn't my area of expertise. And I think that might be when you were touching on like why editors and publishers like things, do like people to stay within genre. There might be that element too, that an editor feels, well, this is my specialist area,
And again, we'll come to the idea in just a second, but when you were writing the original historical crime series, what do you remember about fantasy drawing you back in? Was there always an idea kind of tingling at the edges, just really wanting to be written? Or was it more of a conscious decision after you'd done to think, right, I want to write fantasy, let's get an idea?
I knew I always wanted to go. It was what I really, really wanted to do. I've always wanted to write fantasy, and so that was when I finished the quartet, and I knew that was naturally where I was thinking of. But I didn't have a specific idea, so I did just really sit back. It was the first time I've done this, and I just thought, I'm going to just sit back and I'm going to read around some subjects I love. And again, I went into the British Library and just called up a ton of books on random subjects that I was interested in, with no particular sense of where I might be going with it. And I just let things come up. I'm a sort of big believer in, things come up out of, ideas come out of the strangest places. But I think you also have to be open to them and receptive. So that's really where it came from. So it was both a yearning to go back to the genre that I really, really love, but also allowing some space after having, I'd written 4 books in the same series, and so I was very much in that mode. So I needed almost to kind of step back for a moment and wait.
What were you reading around when the idea for The Raven Scholar came to you? What do you remember about where it came from?
You're going to hate me, but I don't actually remember. Actually, well, I sort of remember bits, but I've had this question asked before, but where did the idea come from? And which is an absolutely fair question to ask. And I think I know some of it. I think some of it certainly came from animal symbolism and reading about animal myths. But where that then specifically moved me, I'd have to go back into my notebooks and try and work out, the patterns of that, because it all kind of intertwines with character as well. And I also drew a map. So all of those things will have kind of cohered. I'm sorry. You're getting a pattern here of like me moving rooms and changing my routine and forgetting where I got ideas. I think at least there's a pattern in my kind of, vagueness.
Well, it works, so that's okay. So if you don't remember much about the idea, I guess in the grand scheme of your quote quote process, what is it you like to do? What is it you like to know before you start typing the first sentence? Because you've done meticulous research. What are you gathering and what are you plotting out before you start writing?
So I do an awful lot of preparatory. I have notebooks absolutely stuffed. So that is a combination of, it's certainly with epic fantasy, of the world building. So all of the, how does this world work? Where's it come from? What's its history? Why are they? If you've got these eight animal guardians that people are drawn to, why? Is what happened to this society? What's its kind of what's its also with the map? What's its geography telling me? If an empire is vast and it's got what's it like to live on one end of the empire from another? So all of that world building, and then also within that the individual characters. Well, who would be training at this particular monastery? What would they be like? What would their story be? Why have they ended up here? Who would they be friends with? Who wouldn't they be friends with? So on and so forth. If they did this, what would if this happened to them at that age? What? So lots and lots of questions, and that all changes, and then as those questions sort of and things combine, that to me is where the story starts to come alive, because you've got these characters all kind of at this moment in time, in this particular situation, but you've also got all of their histories. So that's to me where it all comes together.
We're back with more from Antonia in just a second. If you're enjoying the podcast, there is a way that you can support us to, get more of our show, really. Because the only way I can really bring you more or less an episode a week with some of the world's best writers is with your support. To do that, you can pledge over on Patreon. That's to be a rolling monthly backer. On there is merch, there is bonus content, and there is even a way for your book to sponsor the show, so I can support that. Also, you can make it a one and done with just a one-off tip. Fantastic, over on our Ko-Fi page. Links are in the episodes or wherever you're listening. Just anything that you can send my way, I promise it goes an extraordinarily long way, and it helps me keep bringing you these chats as often as I can. If you'd like to support us, if we've given you any help along the way, you could do that. Patreon.com/writers routine and over at ko-fi.com/writers routine. Let's get back to it then with Antonia Hodgson chatting about her new novel, The Raven Scholar. There's loads about fantasy in this part. It's Antonia's first love. She's gone to it after 4 historical crime novels. It's a good moment to make the most of it, I think, and to really dive in, because we don't talk too often about fantasy authors. It's always good to unpack it when we get a chance. We talk about the rules of fantasy, the future of the series, and why, when it's her own fantasy world, was she so keen on research.
I think the reader always knows when you're just making it up, and it's harder to create a clear logic. So if you ask all these questions, then when you have the answers, they can be interrogated, and they're true. If you're just making it up, then it also you have a tendency, if you make things up, to just go for the easiest route, which again it doesn't feel round. It doesn't feel rounded. It's just easy. So there's that. But I also think it reads it may not be apparent on the page, but I think it reads that, if I used to say it with historical as well, is that you need a deep well of research, but you only need to draw up a thimbleful, and people will still be aware of that well beneath, because it gives you the choices. You have all of that information, and so that when you come to a scene, you're not just going, I have to use that. You're saying, I could use this, that, or the other choice, and then it feels there's a confidence and authority that comes through. I think that you're not just plucking things at random. So hopefully that's how people when they read it, that's what they get. But it also means for me, when I'm writing it, that I feel confident. That it all rings true,
I know that quite a deep part of your research was with an actual raven named Bran. Tell us why that was so important.
Well, I'd written quite a lot of the first draft of The Raven Scholar, and I'd read tons of books and watched lots of lovely videos of ravens, which is a very nice piece of research to do. But I realised that I just needed to get up close to a raven because there will be things I'd miss, and you don't know what you don't know. So yeah, I arranged with Lloyd Buck, who he's a wonderful man who works with Rosebuck, his wife, and they have various birds that they look after and train. And they've worked with David Attenborough and Chris Packham on Springwatch, and so they've got birds that often appear on TV programs. And so that's how I found out about Bran. And so I called Lloyd up and spent some time, because Bran is obviously socialised with humans. He's you're able to watch him up close, and it was just so invaluable. It was also great fun, but it was incredibly invaluable. I found my notebook recently of all the just little things I'd scribbled down afterwards, and they were just such small details, but you couldn't get that in a book because it was my personal interaction with the real live creature.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. You've gone away, you've written the historical crime. You're a huge fantasy fan, so you've always wanted to write in the genre. But just reading it isn't necessarily writing it. So are there rules to what fantasy needs to have in it? Are there do's, are there don'ts? How did you go about learning those before you started writing, and how present were they in your mind?
I think it's not quite how I don't sit down and think about rules. I'm much more, I've been reading epic fantasy since I was very small. So I think it's just been absorbed. And I've, again, a bit like with the historical crime, I think, I'm conscious of, obviously there are things that just aren't going to work. You can't have a historical crime and then suddenly put a spaceship in it, although maybe you could if you wanted to, as long as as long as the intent is there, and you have a good reason. But I wouldn't sit down and go, I mustn't do that, I mustn't do this. And actually, one of the pleasures for me is in having written The Raven Scholar is both enjoying a lot of what the pleasures are of the genre, even down to their individual fight scenes, which was so fun to write. But also like going, well, I'm not necessarily. I don't. How do I put this? I don't always follow. I guess whatever the rule. I was about to say I don't follow the rules, but I'm not sure whether. I think the thing is, once you start reading fantasy, you realise that people have been playing with the genre forever. So I wouldn't want to say, I'm not playing by the rules, because I think part of the rules might be to play around with it anyway. Oh gosh, that's not very articulate, is it? But hopefully you know what I mean.
Fantasy.
It's moving swiftly on.
No, we'll get there. It's fine. Fantasy is a genre that can be poked fun of. Let's be honest. I mean, it's spawned some of the biggest series in the world, but it is one that can be poked fun of, because sometimes it can kind of get a bit ridiculous, or it apes itself, and it can be a parody of itself sometimes. What were you doing to make sure that yours was like real and authentic, and also different from other big fantasy epics and sagas that have come before?
Well, I slightly question that idea, because I think you could say that about any genre if you wanted to. I think there is a certain snobbery, dare I say, around science fiction and maybe particularly fantasy.
Yeah, of course.
Which I've never entirely understood, but because as I said, I've always loved it. But there are plenty of crime novels. You could say the same. Some that are brilliant and some that are parodic. I don't think it's. And I'm plucking crime at random. I think it's true. You could say it literary. It's like there's plenty. So, I just don't. I don't think that really. I didn't go into writing the Raven Scholar with that thought in mind. Because I really respect the authors that write in it and enjoy it, and I'm a fan. So, in the same way that I wouldn't have done that with historical crime. So it didn't really occur to me, to be honest.
One of the most famous current fantasy sagas, Game of Thrones, written by George R.R. Martin, and the thing there is readers have been waiting for. I think it's the last book for years and years and years and years and years. And there is an idea that because he is such a pantser and he's not thought of what the ending might be, again, this is only a theory, that he can't quite tie it together because there are so many strands. He's finding it really difficult to, pull it back into one knot at the end. And fantasy, I can imagine, can do that because there's so many different directions. There's so many worlds or characters that you can use in what you're building. How conscious were you in trying to keep it tight enough and contained enough that it could come to an ending over 3 novels?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, we don't know with George R.R. Martin why there's been such a long gap. I'm waiting feverishly, as everyone else is, and who knows the reason. So with the trilogy that I'm writing, I very clearly have for each of the books. I very clearly know what the ending is for each of them, and so I always know that destination, which helps me, but obviously I can't talk to what it is for other writers, but that for me works quite helpfully, both in terms of I'm writing book 2 at the moment. I'm quite deep into it, but I also know exactly how book 3 ends, so that does help me when I'm making choices within the second book, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. And I think finally, as a big fantasy fan, now your fantasy novel is coming out. You finished it, and it's been taken on, being published. Has it lived up to what you had dreamed as a fantasy fan?
The whole experience has been wonderful. It seems to be mainly it's been getting a really lovely response from readers, which is all you can ask for. I think I was hoping to write the kind of book that I love, which is immersive and full of action, but also big character developments and twists, and so it has been wonderful to write in a genre that I love, and then to share it with people and see the enthusiasm. So that's been fantastic. I always say at the same time I'm just deep, always moving on to the next book, and so there's always that's where my head is at, definitely.
And that is it for this week's Writer's Routine with Antonia Hodgson. The brand new novel is The Raven Scholar. You can get a copy right now. If you are going to do that, use the link in the episode notes. It will take you to our bookshop.org page, and that way you can support this podcast, Antonia, and your local independent bookshop. Another way that you can support the podcast is by becoming a backer and pledging on Patreon or Ko-Fi. Again, links wherever you're listening. And that's about it from us. Remember, you can see quite a few podcasts fully visualised with video and everything over on our YouTube channel. If you just want to stick it on in the background, have a little glimpse inside Sebastian Folkes' living room, Lucy Foley's newly refurbished bedroom. It's all in there on our YouTube channel. Go and take a look if you can, and I will see you next week with a brand new episode of Writer's Routine.